Good afternoon and welcome everyone. That was the video of the Honda Award winner 2021. Fantastic people that doing a lot of good work for us. So anyway, welcome to part 3 and the penultimate webinar of Climate Governance Malaysia's Net Zero Webinar Series 2021. And my name is Alina. The objective of this series is to provide directors with background understanding pertaining to Malaysia's NDC or nationally defined contributions to the Paris Agreement 2015 and how our companies can play a part in helping our country and economy to achieve its commitments. So in July this year, our country had submitted to the UNFCCC her updated NDC to reduce economy-wide carbon intensity against GDP by 45% unconditionally come the year 2030 compared to 2005 levels. But at COP26 in Glasgow this month, nations have been asked to revisit their respective NDCs by end of next year. Hopefully, Malaysia will reduce its total carbon emissions in absolute terms instead of just by intensity. So in part 1 of this series, which was held in July, it was highlighted how policy making both domestically and internationally affects the companies and industries operating in Malaysia, being part of the global value chain. In part 2 in September, we got down into the weeds to hear how adaptation ideas can be operationalized by companies. Hopefully, we gave forward-looking directors food for thought on how to guide their companies find a just transition roadmap profitably whilst contributing to its environment and community. So our panel today is timely in light of one of the recent COP26 core themes, which is financing the global net zero transition. For today, our panelists will talk about adaptation and transition financing. I will now invite Dr. Kalanithi Nesaretnam to guide you on the next part of our journey, together with our 4 impassioned panelists on the economics of net zero. Kala, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Tunku, Dr. Alina, and good afternoon, everyone. Today, on our 3rd and final webinar of the Practical Net Zero series that Alina just talked about, which is really meant for board members, we will hear from the panelists how financial needs for our transition to a low carbon economy can be addressed so as to be climate resilient and future-proof our businesses. I'm sure all companies want to do their best to reduce their carbon footprint and to manage all the threats and opportunities that climate change is forcing upon us. Financial institutions of all kinds can play a vital role in helping allocate adequate capital to accelerate the transition to low carbon economies and net zero industries, whilst also striving to become net zero entities themselves. The recently concluded COP26 has agreed to accelerate efforts towards the phase down, not phase out, of unabated coal power and phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. We will hear from our esteemed panelists how this might have an impact on the corporate world. We have with us today an asset manager, a rating agency, a renewable energy provider, and a bank who will share their expertise with us. We are looking from the perspective of an institutional investor, coming down to a rating agency, to a provider of renewable energy with financing options, and finally, a bank. We will start with our distinguished panelist from BNP Paribas, Ms. Angelia Chin-Sharpe. Ms. Angelia Chin-Sharpe is the CEO and country head for BNP Paribas. She's a member of JC3, which is the Joint Climate Change Committee of the Securities Commission Malaysia and Bank Negara. And she's also a member of the Joint Sustainable Finance Working Group of ASEAN. Ms. Sharpe, Angelia, please enlighten us on what your company is looking for when investing in companies. Ms. Angelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kala. I can't switch on my camera, so if someone can help me with that. Say the host has disabled my ability to switch on my camera.
Zianri, can we help Angelia,
Okay.
please?
I think it's on now. Can everybody see me? All right, good. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to join this webinar with all of you. As what Dr. Kala has introduced, I'm representing BNP Paribas Asset Management. We are one of the largest global asset managers, and we manage money for a lot of important clients. So maybe it's important to share with you how at BNP Paribas look at sustainability and how we integrate sustainability into our investment. If I can go to the next slide, there's a lot of talk about COP26, and I think the title of this discussion is the net zero journey, what board members need to know. So I thought maybe I'll start the slide with first, what is this net zero and why the importance and emphasis towards net zero. So if I can move to the next slide, please. So clearly we know that we are, our planet is overheated, and there's a, sorry, this slide. So clearly we know that our planet is overheated, as you can see, and this year we've recorded the highest temperature ever, and it's not going down. We know that we're feeling hotter every day, everywhere we go, whether we are in Canada or whether we are in Malaysia or whether we're in New Zealand. So clearly, and we know that if we don't do anything today, that's not going to help, because we're already seeing the effects of climate change. And we know that the effects of climate change is irreversible. And if we don't do anything now, today, the consequences are going to be really, really huge. And what part of what COP26 meeting and a lot of this conversation about net zero is actually going back to the Paris Agreement, which is all of us working together to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. So basically what net zero means is to reduce the greenhouse gas emission today, and to ensure ongoing emission today is going to be balanced by this removal. And we need to understand what is the largest contributor to the greenhouse gas. And if you look at the chart on the right, the largest contributor to greenhouse gas is actually the way we actually consume our energy. And 73% of the way we consume energy, whether we are using transportation, and whether is it our businesses and how goods are being produced, because we need to rely on energy to produce goods. And that's why it is the largest contributor on greenhouse gas emission. And part of net zero is therefore to change the way we consume energy today and looking at what is the future entails. I'm sure Mr. Tham will share later on his solution in terms of helping us to achieve that. So let's move to about who we are at BNP Paribas Asset Management. As you can see, we manage assets close to 500 billion euros of assets. We've been here for a long time, and we actually have an office here in Malaysia. We actually have two offices, one which is managing conventional solutions, and the other an Islamic solution. And we also have our banking operations out of Malaysia. If I can move to the next slide, is to basically share with you BNP Paribas Asset Management. We are clearly a leader in sustainability, very well recognized globally on that, and we are rated top 3 by Share Action. Share Action is an NGO that actually looks at financial institutions and whether they really walk the talk in what they do, and we are proud to be rated top 3 by Share Action. If I can move to the next slide, and because we manage so much of money, we actually have a role to play in terms of how we can change and play a role in terms of this journey to net zero. If you can look on this slide, you can see that we've been committed to sustainable investing since 2002. We were one of the founding signatory to the PRI in 2006. And in 2015, we actually became the signatory to the Montreal Carbon Pledge. And what that means is we are already planning from 2015 to make sure that we align our portfolios to the Paris Agreement targets. And therefore, in 2012, we also incorporate the United Nations Compact Principles and sector policies into the way we analyze companies and put them into our portfolio. In 2018, we came up with, sectorial exclusions, such as excluding tobacco, because we know tobacco is not going to do anybody good, whatever you might say. So, clearly tobacco is a sector that we exclude, not just in asset management, but in the banking. We also do not finance or provide facilities to tobacco company. Then in 2019, we came up with our global sustainability strategy, which we map out how we integrate ESG into our investments, which I share later. And part of that also, we came up on the new coal policy, which I will also share with you later. Clearly, we can't do it alone, and it's very important. We need to set up dedicated resources to do that, and we've done that. And actually, this year, we also launched our biodiversity roadmap. While we talk a lot about net zero, we can't just talk about net zero and talking about all this adaptation and mitigation. Importantly, we also need to look at our current biodiversity, which is at crisis. And I think you saw the video, it's not just about, protecting our forests to save our animals, but let's not forget animals are very adaptable and they can survive. But what about us humans? If we are not looking to take care of the biodiversity that we are blessed with on this planet, they are also important consequences. And let us not forget that the forest is also an important carbon capture. So let's look at the next slide in terms of how we look at this ESG integration. Basically, on the next slide, we look at it in 4 steps. One is we fully integrate ESG across our asset classes, whether we are investing in equities or fixed income, and that we've already done that fully. Second is, stewardship engagement is very important, because if we do not engage with companies and exert our influence based on the amount of assets that we manage and make a positive impact, then our work is not done, even though we are just integrating ESG into our investment. Third, as I mentioned about responsible business conduct, we look at that and into our portfolios. And 4 is to make sure that we also look at what are the forward-looking perspectives that's important for us to achieve all these targets. And that is what we look at. And I'll go into it in greater detail in the later slides. And number 5, you can see that it's not just about the existing portfolio. We also want to allocate monies into important investment opportunities that's going to do important sustainable, bringing us from our current brown solutions to greener solutions. And that's why we also have what we call thematic sustainable product capabilities, such as our energy transition fund or our aqua water fund. Those are important channel of allocation of capital to invest into companies that is going to help us to achieve these net zero targets in 2050. And while we're talking about what is the role of board members, I thought it's important to also share with you walking the talk, which is part 6 of this approach, is how we actually do that internally. At BNP Paribas, we also believe in ensuring that, it's not just about our clients, not just about how we manage our clients' money. We also need to make sure that as a firm, we embrace what we believe internally. So on that note, we actually have come up with KPIs on how, as an office, we actually look at reducing carbon, such in the office, such as reducing our electricity consumption, tracking our electricity consumption, paper consumption, how we use IT, looking at improving the use of IT so that we do not consume more energy. And also, we also believe in encouraging stay on this slide, and encouraging staff to change their behaviors, such as we have our 1 million hours to help, which is leave that we give up to 5 days for our staff to actually do community work that is close to their heart. We also have a foundation called Help to Help Foundation, where staff can also tap on this foundation to support the charity work that they actually do. I think some of you know that I also run a charity called the Lost Food Project. So I actually benefit from this initiative that is being launched by the companies such as the Help to Help Foundation, where they have supported us, the Lost Food Project, with grant to do the work that we do. And they have also supported our staff and myself in terms of taking CSR leave to do the work that I do with the Lost Food Project. So I think those are also important things that as board members that we need to look at. It's not just what we show to our clients, but what we actually do internally in our house, because that is going to be important leadership that's going to help our staff to also change the way they embrace sustainability into our business. So if I move to the next slide very quickly, because I don't want to take up the time of my other colleagues on the panel. This is basically when I talk about integration, how we look at ESG into our investments. I think you all will have a copy of the slides and I'll leave that for you to see, from the philosophy, research, stewardship, and reporting, what are the important considerations when we talk about ESG integration. And if we look at the next slide, we actually have a team of sustainable. I mentioned about stewardship. Stewardship is important for us to protect the company values of the company that we invest in, influence a sound regulatory framework from the amount of size of assets that we manage, and also promote better social and environmental outcomes from our engagement. And if you go to the next slide, the next slide, we actually participate collaborative engagement on the next slide. We actually participate in collaborative engagement and initiative with various bodies, as you can see, looking at also covering the 4 key areas: energy transition, environmental sustainability, equality and inclusive growth, as well as other transversal topics with organizations such as the PRI. If I can move to the next slide, then, is to talk about, incorporating responsible business conduct. So on that, we incorporate the United Nations Global Compact principles, looking at sector policies, which are also integrated into our investments processes. And I mentioned about the new coal policy. So what that means, actually, we launched that in January 2020. So what that means is we actually exclude companies with 10% of more of revenues that's coming from thermal coal. We also do not invest in businesses where their electricity output is about, carbon output is about 463 grams of carbon output per kilowatt. So those are, criteria where we actually do not invest into companies or utility companies that do not meet our minimum standards. And if I can move to the next slide, is to talk about focusing on the 4 E's I mentioned. These are the focusing on the future. So what is the future? Part of, I mentioned earlier, to achieve the net zero, we really need to look at the way we consume energy. So energy transition is an important theme that we look at in our investments. Second, the environmental sustainability, that's part of our biodiversity roadmap in terms of addressing forest footprint as well as water footprint. And importantly, is that we want to make sure no one and no country is left behind. So therefore, equality and inclusive are also an important criteria when we assess companies. So lastly, like I say, we can't do this alone, and we invite all of you to be future maker with us, not future taker. So understanding asset managers like yourself, how we look at companies is important, because if you're a board member of listed companies, then this is to help you to understand how we actually, what are the ESG consideration that we look in companies before we actually put them into our portfolio. I will stop here and I'm happy to take more questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelia. That was very informative. And thank you also for sharing with us your internal journey, how BNP Paribas is reducing your own carbon footprint. I'm sure there'll be questions from the floor. I do have some follow-up questions myself, but let's hear from the other panelists and then I will revert. Our next distinguished panelist is Mr. Pramod Das. Yep. Mr. Das is the Deputy Group CEO of RAM Holdings Berhad and the CEO of RAM Sustainability. Mr. Das is also a proud member, I must say, of Principles for Responsible Investments Advisory Committee on Credit Ratings. Pramod, please tell us how RAM rates companies for both credit and ESG so we can improve our ratings to enjoy lower costs. Over to you, Pramod.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Kala. All right. Let me start off by saying that I'm just an analyst and I ask questions. Forget about all those titles mentioned. When I started my career 25 years ago in a bank, I asked questions. I still ask questions. And that's how we go about asking companies about where they are on the ESG journey, where they are on climate change, and so on. So I'm the same person that asks questions. It's just that the questions I ask today are different. So if I move on to the next slide. So RAM has a 30-year history of being a pioneer credit rating agency in Malaysia. We fundamentally assess companies for the fixed income market or the bond market and look at credit worthiness. What that means is basically the ability for companies to pay back their obligations on time and in a fully adequate manner. And we rank them on a scale from AAA to D. We used to look at this issue called ESG under an area called the qualitative assessment of any company. And now it's labeled as environment, social, and governance. So ESG is nothing new. Responsible management teams always ran their businesses responsibly, looking at environment and so on. About 5 years ago, we set up a sustainability unit, which I lead, to basically pioneer the assessment of ESG for companies and also to provide external review services for green bonds or sustainability bonds. The slides will come to you later, so the credentials you can look at later, but I think that's in essence how RAM got involved in the ESG space. Next slide, please. Okay, can you just keep on clicking? This is, I think, one of the more important slides. Effectively, it points out where all of us are in the food chain, so to speak. On the extreme left or right of, depending on your screen, is where the savers are, where we keep our money in banks or EPF. We make choices where we put our money. There are influencers in the market that take into account opinions of investors or institutional funds. And that's where RAM comes in, giving opinions. And you have fund managers like BNP or other institutional investors that sign up to bodies like the Principle of Responsible Investment and take on a challenge of looking at ESG in the investment process. So in plain English, what happens is the money gains the conscience and choices are being made. Do I want a higher return and invest in a coal plant or oil and gas or electric cars and so on? But because of this process, money is being directed to either achieving the 17 SDGs or not. There's the old part of the economy and there's the new part of the economy. Can you click the next? It's a problem when you have animation. It looks good on paper, but when you want to get it clicked. Okay, so this whole thing is connected through the investment chain. And that's where the government and guidelines and regulatory push sort of balances things. So in Malaysia, we have very astute and very visionary regulators, the Securities Commission, Bank Negara, and the Stock Exchange, and several other institutions working to keep us ahead of the curve through the Joint Committee on Climate Change. We've had the Sustainable Responsible Investment Sukuk Guidelines in 2014. all these sort of marshal the direction of the market and add on to the momentum that is going to drive investment into more green space, more development into sustainability. So our role as an opinion provider basically brings transparency to the process and helps in the price discovery of these risks for the bond market. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, you can open out all the slides. Okay. So when you look at the slide, basically the point I'm trying to make here is into our traditional analysis, we ask questions about the environment, social, and governance. So what it means is if I put on my credit rating agency analyst hat, when I have the management team before me and I talk about their business and operations, I'll ask them all the usual questions, and then I'll ask them, okay, where does the waste go from your process? How much energy do you use? Do you even consider ESG? What about the buyers of your product? And so on. I'll also do a site visit, maybe even come in a day earlier and look around the plant and see whether there's a pipe going into the river and effluents are going there. And basically, there's a lot of common sense in looking and understanding this. So usually there are three types of companies. One that go, when you ask them about ESG, they'll come out, yes, we do CSR. And then you spend half an hour explaining the difference between CSR and ESG. The second type of company is, yes, we have ESG policy and we have an ESG committee. But then when you drill down the line and you ask more questions, there's not much depth. And then you have the advanced ones that are ahead of the game and have integrated ESG and sustainability as part of the strategy and not a silo idea. So when we look at ESG in credit ratings, we are, of course, looking at it from a risk perspective. What happens if this company doesn't address ESG risk, or what are the risks that investors would be cognizant of or want to know about, and what is the impact on the credit rating? These factors, we look at it from the perspective of how relevant or material or what time frame it is, and see whether there's an impact on the rating. But the limitation of a credit rating is it looks at a definition where it's about the ability and willingness to pay back the bond or sukuk on a timely basis adequately. It is not a moral call on the company. So some of the higher rated entities could be even coal power plants because they have a PPA that, and if they run the plant correctly and there are no problems, it can pay back its bonds in a very consistent manner. Or you may have a tobacco company that is very cash rich. So the traditional definition of a credit rating looks purely at the ability and willingness to pay back on time. So that's where we moved on and developed something called a sustainability rating. Can I have the next slide, please? So in a sustainability rating, we look at not the ability and willingness of a company to pay back its obligations on time, but how its environment, social governance, and positive impact footprint is. Of course, governance is still a very important part of this process. So if I look at this, you could have a company with a poor credit rating, but a high ESG rating. But investors have to look at it in totality. So it's no use if the company goes bust, but it was very high on the ESG factors. So in a balanced world, I think most investors look at what sectors they want to invest in, what sectors they don't want to invest in, and they use the sustainability rating as part of the guide. This also helps companies that are on the journey to on sustainability know where they are, and they can track the performance over time. We also developed a risk-based ESG analysis that looks at ESG risk from an investor's perspective. This puts the highest risk in band of 15 and the lower risk in the single digits. So we have looked at about 102 companies so far, and we're building coverage, and we are providing this information to investors and stakeholders to help assess their the risk ESG risk profile on a more consistent basis. Is this the only way you can do it? Well, you can analyze these on your own factors, but we are providing this so that there's a consistent basis to look across. So sustainability ratings and our ESG analysis or risk-based benchmarking are tools that one can use. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is going a bit more in depth. For sustainability rating, we look at 36 different practices. Why not 305? Well, we found these 36 factors to be most meaningful, but different sustainability agencies will have different criteria. So I'm not saying this is the only way. This is one of the ways. It's like going to one doctor and you go to another doctor and get a different opinion. But the whole idea is when there are not a lot of people looking at this, this is another eye into what one needs to be aware of. And as more and more companies do this, I think there would be more change happening. Move on, please. Thanks. This, I think for all of you here, if you want to dabble and find out a bit more, and if you like to play around with stuff, go to our analytics website, analyticsram.com, and you can actually look at sector risk and ESG risk by just playing about it. So I urge you to go and look there, because this slide is nothing but a graphic show unless you want to go in and investigate the risk, ESG risk for different industries. And we have some companies there as well that you want to look at and find out more about. Next slide, please. Okay, this is my final slide. The purpose here is not to dazzle you with all the logos and stuff, but just to give you the perspective that you can run, but you can't hide from regulation and guidelines that are coming. So if you are a corporate or you are a director on the board of a listed or unlisted entity, you need to be aware that it's not only banks like BNP, but every other bank in town is looking at ESG, looking at climate change. The regulators are either drafting regulations or best practices that require them to ask questions. We ask questions to the banks that we rate, whether they ask questions to their clients on ESG. So if you don't ask your own management team the questions about our funding sources being affected by the new move towards climate change and ESG, or our banks pulling out their lines or reducing their lines because we didn't comply with something, or is our cost of funding going to go up in 5 years' time? Or questions like, I've heard of transition finance, what is it? We are in a brown industry. What do we need to do to access that, to change our business? Are we still going to be in the global supply chain of Nestle or another global group? Should we change our company policy to electric cars? These are questions that you could already ask even if you didn't come for this webinar.
Yeah.
A lot of it is common sense. It's about driving a business responsibly. And for those of you who are on the forefront of this, you might find it's not really a risk per se, but it's an opportunity to position your companies ahead of the crowd, position yourself as a premium product. And a lot of sustainability efforts actually translate to cost savings. So for the accountants among you, even if you're not doing it for the planet, do it for the bottom line, and it's actually good for the planet. It's funny, quite a lot of digitalization expenditure for efficiency cuts down the use of paper and cuts down the use of logistics. And if you measure your costs before and after a sustainability drive, sometimes you might actually find that the company operates on less cost. So my final message is all of this is common sense. And everything I have on the slide, you can just Google and read and read and read and read. Use your iPad or your tablet, and don't print it out if you can, because these are very long articles. But the essence of it is ask questions, figure out whether you want your company to still exist in the next 5 years, and ask what your customers want and what your competitors are doing. And if none of that involves a question on climate change or ESG, then either you are in a very unique industry or you're heading for trouble soon. So I think I've made my message clear. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Pramod. I think that was very, very clear. And I'm so glad that you actually go on the ground to check us. You're talking about waste, how we dispose of waste and all that. So that's great because, at the end of the day, you are in charge of assessing us. And I just watched this movie yesterday called Devils. I'm not sure whether you've seen it. But in the movie, they talk about rating agencies, institutional investors as the new God, because, in a way, you are also charting our future. So we can talk about that later. So let me just get on to the next panelist, who is Mr. Tham. Mr. Tham is founder and CEO of Ditrolic Energy Group. Mr. Tham has successfully developed projects in various countries, such as Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and of course, Malaysia. Mr. Tham, your personal journey is very impressive. Many companies are considering or keen to adopt renewable energy. What advice do you have? And are you able to provide financing options? Mr. Tham, the floor is yours, please.
All right, I'm trying to start the video by facing the same problem.
Zianri, do we have Mr. Tham's video?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, you're on now.
Okay. Yeah, are you looking at the main presentation screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. All right, thank you very much. So let me introduce a bit about our company. Ditrolic Energy is a clean energy company. So we are both a developer and also a service provider. So we are on the both side of the energy industry. We are the end user and we are the service provider as well to the financing as far as the green financing is concerned. So I would like to start this with a bit of evolution, a bit of story. So it's also my personal experience, the company experience going through this green project financing journey over the past, I would say, about 12 years. So we started very early on. Our company, we started during the nascent stage of the industry. So we actually have the opportunity to witness the evolution of the financial industry. So I think it's good to share this to give a context to board of directors or people who are interested in embarking on ESG journey, or either you are a investor into energy or you are an end user who is trying to green your energy source. So this hopefully give you a bit of context. So when it was back in year 2000, late 2000, it was considered a nascent stage for the green energy industry. For me, is specifically in the solar industry. So at that time, there was not much recognition for green project. So the financing banks and usually the local banks, there's no real recognition for green projects during that time. So big projects are usually structured finance, and usually they demand full recourse, asset backed or corporate guaranteed for all the loans that you are taking to finance, let's say, just a small solar system. So you can imagine during that time, it was perceived as high risk, understandably, because it was quite early, and yeah, and you can see that the perceived high risk and the financiers are mainly multilateral banks when we talk about big projects. So we have opportunity to work with many multilateral banks such as ADB, IFC, under World Bank. So those are the early financiers of green projects. So when we go into the beginning stage of the industry, we started to see some recognition for green projects, mainly through third-party, certification of projects. So people start to verify green projects because at that time, banks have limited experience and capability to verify a green project. So that was in the beginning stage of the industry. So there are still limited recourse because the recognition of green project in a certain extent have already de-risked some of the technological risks, but limited recourse is still a must. It has the asset have to be backed. Usually they need a corporate guarantee for all the green investment, and risk is shared with third-party agency such as Credit Guarantee Corporation, and equivalent around the region. So during that time, when we talk about big projects, it's mainly financed by still multilateral banks. The financing are more strategic than a profit driven. Still, they have to make some profit to fund their operation, but it was more strategic than profit driven. And during that time, we started to see a lot of development banks that comes up to finance projects during that time, such as we have the opportunity to work with KfW, DEG, Propalco. These are all European development banks, which at that time were quite forefront, in the green project financing, especially in the emerging markets, right? So Malaysia also go through the same phase. So in the advanced stage, in the third stage of the journey, I think the recognition green project the banks has already come on board, right? So the recognition of green project is quite widely recognized, and banks started to do non-recourse financing is possible, depending on the project scale and project risk. So this is this is basically they have clearly identified all the risks. Technological risks more or less have been fully understood, and execution risks and all the risks have been fully been able to be mitigated. So we also see during that time there's emergence of standard green loan product in the market, right? So scale is still important because you can't finance a very small project on a non-recourse basis, right? So you still need scale in order to do that. And during that period, you can see the financiers are mainly commercial banks. They have come in, replacing mainly multilateral bank, development banks. So these are they have already have developed some expertise. So, but you can see these are mainly taken up by the global banks, regional banks. They are the early comers to the green financing market. So when you reach a maturity stage in terms of financing, you can see the hallmark is basically you can see standard green loan products will be widely available. So basically you can walk into a bank and tell them, I want to finance a solar system on my roof. I want to finance an energy efficiency projects. So these are the things that have already started, especially during the past, I would say, 2 to 3 years. Project scale still matters. When you talk about large scale project, the scale of the project is still a driver to how you structure your finance. But the standard green loan actually made the financing of green project widely available to SME, to small projects, and also to some of the large projects. They are also, the threshold are getting higher and higher. So you also see the emergence of green bond or sukuk, like RAM rating just now have mentioned. So it has been rated now. There are very clear methodology to rate green projects. So these are the hallmark of mature market, financing market. And you see the financier for green project have switched to commercial bank again, but you start to see local banks. A lot of local banks started to offer green standard products, right? Bond issuers, and they are very active in the market, like what you see today in this session. So this is the evolution that, from a developer's point of view, that we have seen the evolution throughout the period. Different countries have different maturity. Their industry have different maturity. Like Malaysia, I would say today Malaysia is a mature market for green financing, right? So I was also asked to share what can we do in terms of financing a project, right, of my company. So apart from the product that banks have, I would say in the mature market, we have seen the emergence of energy as a service, which transfer the financing risk from end user to service provider like my company.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So you see procurement, basically we have 4 types of procurement: renewable energy. You can buy green tariff. You can buy REC, renewable energy certificate. You can do a solar on your rooftop. There's the on-site distributed generation, and there is off-site generation. So there are several strategies which I will not go into very much detail. So basically, as an end user, a company, you can actually purchase the system by yourself to put it on your roof, because it's the easiest way to do that, and you can actually subscribe to the financing package that is available in a lot of the banks nowadays, local banks, regional banks in Malaysia. So for us, our company, we can actually do a kind of overall solution. So you can if you are not keen to put it on your balance sheet, you don't want to put the debt in your balance sheet, you don't want to finance. So company like us, we provide solution as a service. So if you want to put the solar panel on the roof, you can come to us, we can install the system for you without capex. So you just buy clean energy from us. So that is one way on top of the one that you purchase it outright. You can come to us to subscribe energy as a service, be it on your rooftop. If you want to buy green energy in a larger volume, in some country, we can actually build a solar farm for you, for your company off-site, somewhere 100 kilometer, 200 kilometer from your factory. We can sell the power to your factory or your premise, right? So these are a way to transfer the financing risk from your company to the service provider. So you are subscribing as a service rather than taking on the debt on your balance sheet. So these are very, very popular with big companies where they care a lot about the balance sheet, right? So I think I would stop here. If there's any other question, feel free to ask in the Q&A session later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tham. Very, very interesting. I'm so glad that you're providing this financial service. Maybe later you can share with us also some successful implementation of projects especially in Malaysia. Yeah, Mr. Tham. So yeah. I think we will now move on to the final panelist this afternoon is Puan Zarina Ghazali from MBSB Bank. Puan Zarina is the Executive Vice President at MBSB and in charge of business banking. She has been involved in financing renewable energy projects, especially solar, biogas, biomass, and is very aware of various schemes available for green financing. Puan Zarina, the floor is yours, and please tell us how banks can assist companies to transition to a low-carbon economy.
Thank you, Dr. Kala and Tunku Alina for inviting us to participate in this forum. And thank you, Mr. Tham, for sharing the evolution of the financing era. It seems like, you talk a lot more than a banker and you know what has been going on. But anyway, let me introduce on my first slide. Yeah, can we move to the first slide? Who are we? We are actually a full-fledged Islamic bank. We are a wholly owned of a Malaysian building society, Berhad. I think those era where we were a building society, we are the pioneer who provide mortgages. Yeah, that is back in 1950s. So that school of thought of British is actually have bring us to a more on the societies, a contributor and a player in terms of financing. Yeah. And as at to date, we offer a wide range of Islamic banking services, which include corporate, SME, consumer, and trade finance. So technically, we have a full suite of products, and specifically, we have a full attention for green financing. So in terms of for us to support the country's accessibility, we in fact going to raise a specific fund, a green fund to allow us to facilitate the facilities. Maybe we share the next slides, straightforward things. We didn't start it today. We have started quite for a while at the initial periods, where during the large solar scale one, where we have financed 150 megawatt solar plants in Seremban. Yeah, and subsequently a small one, medium scale in Mersing, Keluang, and we also do biogas and biomass financing. So in terms of that, I think the board of directors, and the management are focusing to grow the ESG asset size. And we have actually showed that internally, we basically walk the talk. Internally, we have implemented ESG risk framework, which is based on Bank Negara, of which we evaluate those transactions, taking those who having adverse or contribute into the climax positions. and where we also have a sustainability working group who will monitor our effort in getting the sustainability of KPIs. So all these are in line with Bank Negara and our parents' ultimate parents holding, which is EPF, as well as SC. Yeah. And we do announce on yearly basis integrated reporting, where we basically will try to close the gap where in terms of the ESG, and we have managed 80%, and soon we are targeting to have a full adoption by 2022 and 2023. So having said that, now we have a HQ, which is a green building. We work here, we basically try to practice a healthy way of doing recycling, energy saving, so that it create the awareness. And that will basically create awareness and then life, and that they will bring it back home, and therefore it will contribute to the society as a whole. So it has to start somewhere, and we believe it has to start from a family and the persons. Yeah. So having said that, this is actually, I don't have too many slides, but I think this is the most important slide for my presentation. How MBSB basically support these activities. We do have a special team to solicit and finance green activities. Yeah, we have extended from solar to biogas and biomass, mini hydros, yeah, large scale. So what we do, we have actually doing it for a couple of years, and we have financed during the constructions where Mr. Tham said that not many banks will look into it, and we do. We have financed the construction up to a completions. Yeah, and having said that, and in line with our strategy, we have this year get a board approval to basically to launch to raise a 5 billion of fund to support green financing. So in that manner, we have a lot more room for a sector limit, yeah, for us to finance any green financing, be it solar, make a rooftop solar, or large or small, biomass, biogas, and waste to energy. Yeah, we are here, and please do come to us. Yeah. And in terms of how we finance during construction, we will try to facilitate the developers, all the contractors, the EPCC or the concession owner, to finance their projects. So during construction, we will give a grace period where you just need to service the facilities, and we finance up to 80% of your EPCC costs. So if in the case of solar and you have to acquire a land for that solar farm, we also finance the solar, the land for you to facilitate your projects. So given that, upon the completions, we basically were able to reprice the position of this financing to facilitate, because we are reflecting the risk of the projects. Yeah? During the greenfield, yes, we have to carry some credit risk, but upon you have completed, we basically will reprice, and you have a lower regime of rate. So that part where we have committed, and we will have a more fund and more financing for the coming years. As at now, we do have about more than 1 billion financing in ESG, but we are targeting to grow it up, at least fulfilling the fund that we're going to raise 5 billion. So we see there's a lot of schemes in the markets, yeah, the net energy metering, and then the feed-in tariff and all that. How we play along is actually government itself, the authority have given a lot of incentive and support. Therefore, that is actually to give more advantages to the sponsors, the developers, where we can work together with the credit rep, Dana Jamin or CGC, to allow you to have a credit risk-free kind of a position. And we will also facilitate those application for tender. So we have, I think to date, if I'm not mistaken, from last Solar 1 and up to 4, we have participated in the pre-award situation where we give the support letter, and we also give a draft letter of offer to ensure that you are qualified for the tender. So that part, those services that we share here, I know we were able to do so and to facilitate those companies who basically have the intention to develop or to have a contract of RE's businesses. I think I have not much of things to say. I think a lot of those has been explained by the other panelists. So I think Kala, this is my last slides. Yeah. I mean, I'm very open for those potentials or looking for financings. Yeah, and we're going to be there to support. Yeah. So Kala, back to you, Kala.
Thank you very much, Zarina. And that was, I think, again, very clear. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've heard from all the panelists. And if I may, I would like to follow up, have some follow-up questions to delve further into their presentations. We will then open the floor to questions from participants. Please post your questions in the chat box. We've already got a couple of questions that have already come in. We will cover as much as we can. And if we cannot, because I'm also looking at the time, I think we've got another 30 minutes to go. We will definitely get written answers from the panelists, and this will be posted on the website. So let me start with Angelia. Angelia, I understand from your presentation that you engage and provide stewardship. Perhaps you can share some examples.
Yes, happy to. I think that also will answer Jennifer's question in the Q&A regards to, what impact stewardship can play. If I can get Zianri to show my slide again, I have one which is right after the appendix, which is the CLP case study. I thought that would be an interesting sharing with you how through the years since 2019, our engagement with CLP and how through that engagement, it has basically changed or basically CLP has announced its commitment towards net zero, and then how then that also allow us to start including CLP into one of the companies that we can invest in. So maybe if I think it's the after
Angelia, yes. Zianri, it's after the thank you slide.
Yeah. No, after the appendix. Right after the appendix. No, yeah, after that. Yeah. That's correct. Thank you. So let me just share how this success story came about, and it was just very recent, as you can see. And how it started, if you can see on the left, CLP is actually a Hong Kong listed power utility company. And we do recognize that they have actually announced their commitment to sustainability to their climate vision 2050. However, when we looked into the company, it did not kind of tick the boxes in terms of our expectation. And that time, 2019, it did not meet our core policy, which I shared with you earlier, and therefore we were putting this company under the watch list. Clearly, of course, we know our role here is not to do any exclusion or divestment, because I think it's important to understand part of engagement is not to say, okay, we don't want to invest in your company, because if we do that, then we actually lose our mileage in terms of making that change to our engagement with company. So what we do is we continue to engage with the company, and in around June 2021, as you can see in the green bubble, in Asia they launched this AIGC. AIGC is basically the Asian Investors Group on Climate Change, and we actually played the co-lead role in this through AIGCC. And part of AIGCC is actually backed by investors with assets over $8.8 trillion. So you can see using the money that we manage for our clients actually has an important voice, and we should work together collectively to use the important voice to make a positive change. And through that collective engagement, and clearly, if $8.8 trillion of assets are thinking, should we invest in your company? Clearly, you need to make change to make sure that you are in the green list for us to want to invest in your company. And through that engagement, obviously, we also worked with their board members, with the sustainability team, in terms of also what are the expectations of global investors like yourself that you have to meet before we can consider you into a list that we think we can invest in. So through that engagement, they also bring with them what are the expectations of the global investors community and improve on their improve in terms of their ability to meet those checkpoints. And therefore, early this year, in September 2021, to be precise, we have been engaging with them, and they, in the end, updated their climate vision statement, of which they basically state that as part of becoming a utility company of the future, they are now committed to achieving net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. And they also map out how they're going to do that. It's not just making an announcement and not having a clear vision and activities in terms of how you're going to meet that. So what they're going to do is they also accelerated their plans to phase out coal-based assets by 2040 and a decade earlier than what they have earlier pledged. And also that, again, is something that we want to see. And in the interim, they are going to use science-based targets as part of, how they're going to integrate activities to limit global warming as a firm to below 2 degrees pre-industrial levels. So we are really happy with the developments within CLP, and you can see it's through the years of engagement and working with companies, again, answering Jennifer's question as to what are the barriers and how we can work together. I think when we are working with companies, it's not about meeting local standards. You do have to align to global standards, and for us, it's the EU taxonomy and the Paris aligned targets. Those are very important criteria that has to be achieved. So I thought I'll stop there, and I think it's a very interesting case study to share with all of you. We are not giving up hope with companies. As long as you're willing to engage with us, we are willing to share with you how to improve that journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelia. I think that's so important, the hand-holding. Next question is to promote, so many companies in Malaysia are now pledging to be net zero by 2050, which, as you know, is very long term. So is RAM planning to monitor and rate these companies?
Well, we love to rate these companies. The rating process is voluntary.
Yep.
So if they want to do a sustainability rating, they come to us. There's no regulation that requires us to do it. But the companies in the bond market that have a credit rating, definitely our analysts will keep an eye on these pledges. Is part of their management strategies, part of their management governance in their analysis. We will be looking at which sectors are going to adhere to this. And I think in a related point, when we talk about the economy, I think there was a general question on economy. Malaysia is in plantation, oil and gas, manufacturing. There's been a lot of emphasis on green lending, do solar projects, do mini hydro and so on. But the bulk of the economy is not green.
Yeah.
And that's where the role of, I think the example for CLP is a good one. That is really the task of the financial sector, because it's very easy to say, okay, I'm just going to do green projects or solar and all that. But what about the 90% of the other businesses out there? You have to start engaging with those businesses. If they are not aware that it's going to be a problem, that's where the financier needs to start engaging, because if that business ends up having stranded assets, then the bank is going to be having to have that non-performing loan or that issue with credit later. But I think not really for that reason, but engaging with the client to get them to change. And it's going to be a solution-driven idea. And the other important factor to realize is that if these companies don't transition, I think we talked about the supply chain, they might get kicked out of the global supply chain, and that can affect the bank's assessment of the credit position of that entity as well, because maybe it had only one major buyer, and it was from Europe, and then suddenly now it doesn't meet the requirement.
Criteria. Yeah.
So that's the real thing. So the future is not so much in green finance, but more in transition finance. I think that's where the emphasis is going to come.
Okay, thank you, Pramod. I'm just, looking at the time as well. Mr. Tham, lots and lots of questions are coming for you from the floor. So let me, I think, just ask those questions. There's this question from Mr. David Tay. He says, when you said clean energy solution, does Ditrolic produce more than just solar? Energy as a service is interesting. Currently, only 6% is considered renewable energy in Malaysia. We need more of this.
Yes, our solutions, Ditrolic Energy actually operates in 6 countries, in Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Indonesia, China, Bangladesh as well. So the clean energy is very much depending on the location. So in some countries, most of the country have solar. Right? I mean, solar is the best resources.
Sure.
Some countries have wind, some countries have more hydro potential. Philippines have more geothermal potential. So our supply of clean energy really depends on which country we are talking about. So if we are talking about Malaysia, of course, predominantly it comes from solar. So that's where we can get the best access to irradiation, sun. So wind we would like to have it, but at this moment it's not feasible technologically speaking. So predominantly I think the supply in Malaysia will be from solar at this moment. So we do supply other types of clean energy, or in the process of supplying other types of clean energy. For example, in Bangladesh they have some wind resources. So we are developing some wind project over there to be able to sell to the customer, the same concept, but the sources are different. So to answer the question, so we definitely need more clean energy. To answer your 6% question, energy mix. Malaysia, I shared with the panelists this month's data, energy mix from renewable energy is less than 4% for last month. 96% is coming from coal and gas. So these are the energy mix. So we should not be just for knowledge sake, we should not be confused capacity with energy mix. Capacity is a nameplate capacity. So what we see in a lot of headline announcement, 30%, 40%, these are all capacity, nameplate capacity. But how much electricity it can generate is another question, right? So what we are interested in is energy, not so much the capacity, right? So there's a long way to go. I agree with you. So there need to be a rethink and a reimagining of our power sector, right? Which Angelia rightly mentioned, 70% is coming from energy, the carbon footprint. So this is the single most important thing that I believe as a country we should do. To how do we redesign the sector? That's the most important thing.
Thank you, Mr. Tham. There are a few more questions for you, but let me pose this next question to Puan Zarina, coming from Datuk Hisham Othman. He wants to know whether when you finance rooftop solar projects, do you require TNB as a party to the financing agreement? Zarina?
Not really. So on the rooftop, we will basically finance partly is an equipment. So we will facilitate the transaction as you require a facility to purchase an equipment. And hence, that will be based on your balance sheets and based on your normal business income to pay us. So in terms of the large solar, then it will be based on their tariff that you're getting, and also in terms of how long does it take for them to repay back. So all that is basically will tailor to their purpose and requirement.
Thank you, Zarina. Next question to you, Pramod, is from Mr. David Tay. He wants to know whether the sustainability rating analysis of RAM is aligned with GRI.
Yes, we do take into account, and that's important to get the information standards correct.
Thank you, Pramod. Back to you, Mr. Tham, from Robert Situ Morang. He has a small project for 2 megawatt solar power in central Sulawesi. Can you give us what are the requirements to get financing from your bank? I think he meant from you.
I'm not a bank, but I can give you a few tips. You know, I have done many financing throughout my past 12 years in the industry. Right, first bank usually one scale. Right, scale is important. So your project in Central Sulawesi in a big country of Indonesia, a more remote part, I think it will be the bank may perceive a lot of risk, so you have to look at who is your off-taker. I think first of all, who is buying the energy, whether the counterparty is a good company, whether you can collect the payment. So if it's a government, it's all good. So technologically, it's not so much of a problem. Can be done, I believe. If not, there's no project. So to 2 megawatt to wrap into all this exercise to structure the finance and to de-risk the project. I would think the bank, if you only have a single project, I think the bank would ask you for quite a lot of sponsor support, right? In terms of you have to build it yourself first, maybe, and then you probably have to guarantee the completion and also probably guarantee a certain extent of a period of the operation from your as a sponsor, right? So this is how you should structure a project of this size in that part of the world, right? That's how I look at it. But I'm not a bank, so I can't finance you.
Mr. Tham, just one more question from Mr. Lee Kek Meng. He says, we are the local EPC as well as PPA investors. Are you able to finance our C&I rooftop projects based on our PPAs of installation asset as asset-backed security?
This question also, I think, to the banks, but I mean, as a peers in the industry, I would say I can answer on behalf. I think it's widely available. I think a lot of banks are quite open towards this such arrangement. So it's already pretty common. I think more or less you can just, as long as you have a good customer, financing the project is not a problem. But,
I must thank Mr. Tham then for promoting the bank.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we deal with many banks, so I can share with you that banks are very open to finance as long as the counterparty is a good party, and I think that's about it. In terms of risk, that's most important. I think we won't talk about solar panel. What type of solar panel you use nowadays, because it's already technology is not a risk anymore. So more on your offtake risk.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Tham, and ladies and gentlemen, I think we've got another 10 minutes to go, and I think we're going to wrap up with reflections from COP26. So it has been 6 years since the Paris Agreement, and COP26 just concluded a few days ago. So I thought maybe it will be interesting to have your viewpoint. Angelia, would you like to start? Yeah.
Yes, sure. I think, what has come out from the COP26, I mean, people have different views. Something is not aggressive enough. Something there's not enough action. Like you say, it's not facing out, it's facing down, But clearly, we also need to recognize that, yes, we are talking about solutions like what Mr. Tham's company is providing, but we also need to recognize that we don't have all the solutions to immediately say we are going to go into a green, a sustainable economy. But the important thing is that we know that we need to start. I think important thing is, though we're talking about facing down or not facing out yet, but you can see some institutions like ourselves, we have our coal policy. We are very strict about carbon emission. We're not backing down on that in terms of our financing or investing. I think importantly is also that if we talk about limiting the targets in terms of the temperature, that's not going to change. So, but the takeaway is that when it comes to COP27 next year, the targets are going to be rather aggressive because we are going to 2022 and 2030 is the checkpoint. So a lot is going to happen. So I also coming back to Mr. Daniel's question as well. We cannot say let's not do anything. If you don't do anything, then you're going to face your Kodak moment. Meaning that your own industry, your own business might be phased out. So clearly, we have to see that things are happening, and we should be aware of that, and we should start looking at how we are going to transition the way we conduct our business.
Thank you, Angelia. Pramod?
I'm going to take a more down-to-earth stab at the topic. What's very important to realize is that our economy is coming out of this whole pandemic thing. Some businesses found a way to work through the MCOs, not having staff go in. Then they realized as well, we didn't have much of a carbon footprint because of that, but we still could do our business. We didn't have to take up so much office space. We didn't have to fly and have those air miles. We could do our business at a lower cost of doing business. So just put on the practical hat. If this is an opportunity to change the way your business operates, anyway, you had to change during this pandemic. Rethink it fast. Otherwise, if you're going to do business the same old way,
it's not going to work.
So if you could do it during the pandemic when no cars are on the road, and actually that was the fastest way to control emissions. Now, if you look at the traffic, it's all back, and everyone has forgotten about the clean skies and the nice air we used to breathe. And then there were some articles or some animals coming back in but I think all those animals have gone off now, and we've forgotten about that. So, it took something horrible like that to suddenly for us to clean up the act. And now things are normalized. What do we do about that learning experience? Sustainability, climate change, all these are not silo topics. You have to integrate it into the way you're doing business. And that's how your financiers are going to look at it. So if you don't clean up your act, you don't change your business, either your buyers will walk away or your financiers will walk away, or it will cost you more to do business. So I would end on that note.
Yeah, thanks, Pramod. I suppose RAM is also looking at reducing your own footprint here. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Tham, over to you. Reflections, COP26.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to reflect on a more personal way because of the company that my business is doing, right? Our company. So I'm doing this day in, day out because that's what we are doing. So I have a more practical view about the COP, whatever commitment, because I think it's important to ask ourselves, what can you do today to decarbonize your daily living, your company operation and all these things, right? So as a person today in Malaysia, I'm talking about energy, which is the biggest chunk. Of course, you have your waste, you have your transport, packaging, and all these things. It's not only energy, but energy is the biggest chunk, right? So today you can put a solar on your roof. My house have solar. Basically, all my houses have solar. So my house is zero energy. So I cut carbon across all my houses. I have 2 houses, so not too many. So I'm carbon neutral for my house. So as a person, today in Malaysia, you can be carbon neutral as a person, right? I don't have an electric car yet. So if I buy a car, I could be, cutting that off as well. So it's doable, right? The policy allow you to do that. So if you go to your business, you can install solar, but it can only cut you maybe 10-20% of your energy emission, right? Your carbon emission. because rooftop is small, you can't cut more than that. So it depends on a larger electrical system to decarbonize, right? So what policy allow us to do that? So the question you need to ask, right, at the business level. So then you zoom out into a country level, right? So it is at the personal level, business level, and country level. Yes, you can make all the commitment, but on the ground, what can you do? Are the policy there for you to do what you want to do, right? You can have your carbon cut, you can have your carbon tax, but you can't tax people something, but there's no escape, right? Maybe you don't have a policy for me to buy electric car. So how can you penalize me? I want to buy, but you don't allow me to buy. I want to do this, but there is no policy. So I look at it from a very practical approach from what I can do. Even my company, just to add, my company is the first SME to be registered for this SB, science-based target, zero energy. So we are going to achieve by 2030. So we are the first company in Malaysia and Singapore region. So we will get all our operation decarbonized by 2030. So it's a science-based target for our company. So we are very much doing an experiment on ourselves to see what can we do and helping other people do the same. So from there, you will have a lot of answer, I believe.
Yep. Congratulations, Mr. Tham, but I'm sure your footprint will be pretty small, knowing that you are in renewable energy. For Zarina, over to you now. Just some reflections, yeah?
I think in my personal view, a lot of things relies on the practicality. The achievement of whether we achieve or not will be subject to certain things, which includes economy, include the behavior of the attitude of the people and the awareness. So in terms of practicality, facing down is more achievable than facing out. It's always like you don't overpromise and underdeliver. So that part, and I believe so. This is not a one-party shows or commitment. It basically the whole stakeholders from the side of the governments, the regulators, the societies, the bankers, the financier, and also those in the commercial. All those have to basically support that motion. Then only will we achieve what we want. So and also a way of living. I believe it should start in a family. The children must know that you use recycling things, you don't waste and all that. And with the parents and the schools, as well as your office, yeah, you go to the office, you know that certain things is do and don't according to what will basically contribute negatively to the climate. So those things, I believe so, is not an overnight. And for us to achieve it successfully, we need to pace it out, and not necessarily, it can be done same timing for a developed country and developing country. So
thank you.
That's my take.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with you. Education. That's the only way we can, move the needle. We've got a minute to go. Anybody has any final, takeaway messages for the audience? Jump in, anybody. Pramod, Angelia.
Okay, I spell sustainability with a $sign. Align your business and profitability with sustainability, and make it part of your strategy.
Thank you, Pramod. Ms. Sharpe.
Yeah, I think, while there's a lot of conversation on net zero, let us not forget about biodiversity, because that's quite important for us to safekeep it, because it also has a role in terms of rebalancing the carbon emissions. So I think that's, we always stress about net zero, but we don't also stress the importance of the biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sharpe. Mr. Tham and then Zarina.
Yeah, I think for me, very simple. I think actions start with ourselves. So once you do it, then you understand, you bring it to your company, you bring it to the national level. So instead of top down is one way, but I believe bottom up, you need to understand what we are doing. then you will appreciate the thing more, right? And the solution.
Perfect. Agree.
I think I totally agree with Mr. Tham. Way of living, awareness, and it start from the family, then only will include to the economy and therefore, so I believe that is somewhere that we have to go through the awareness. I mean, this forum is very good in terms of that, and I think a lot more should be done to reach
To
to
build
the
the awareness. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll agree with me that we have had a very engaging session with our expert panelists. I hope they have given you some good insights into financing options for your transition to a low carbon economy. As the clock ticks, climate change impacts already being felt across Malaysia. I think you all agree with me. Temperature is rising in cities so dramatically. Flooding is increasing, damaging. And at the same time, some regions suffer water shortages as rain becomes more sporadic and inconsistent. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the future. Malaysia has announced our net zero targets, so companies that have not started to decarbonize should start now. Businesses have both a responsibility and an opportunity to proactively commit to decarbonize. But everything starts with a commitment. So are you the company that says, I promise to get to net zero, or I will be net zero by 2050? I will leave you with that thought. In the meantime, I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists for sharing the experience and expertise. And of course, Tunku Dr. Alina alias, Alina, why don't you please come on? For all the hard work she has put in organizing this series of CGM webinars. 3 webinars has been really, outstanding. So Alina, kudos to you.
Thank you. It's been very rewarding, Kala. You have to agree. We met so many people on this journey, and everyone has played a role, especially this panel. My goodness, without the financial flows, how are we going to move? So
Correct.
really appreciate this part. Yes, the most critical. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So thank you,
let
everyone.
let me also thank the participants for your questions and lively participation. And till we meet again, please stay safe and goodbye. Panelists, may I just possibly just stay back for a few seconds so that we could take a group picture. Thank you, everyone. Again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
So this is the last of the year.
Yes.
Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you. I know your time is so precious.
So precious.
Yeah, so precious, but I truly am grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Are we staying for a photo or something?
Just a
Yes.
quick photo.
Sita, can you organize it, please, so that we can have this on the website?
I've already taken.
Huh? You have?
You didn't ask us to get ready.
Yeah. You didn't ask us to smile.
Need to pause, right?
We'll do it again.
Please, one more.
Yeah, one more, please.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Zarina.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you,
Sita.
Sita. And thank you to everyone. Have a
Most
lovely
welcome.
year.
Okay, take care all.
Okay,
Okay,
bye.
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 Bye. Thanks,
Thank you
Kala.
so much.
Thank you, Kala.
Yeah.
Welcome. Bye, everybody.